Jeff. Welcome on in to another episode of the Tryhard Academy podcast, where it's always better to get good rather than get wrecked. Now, this episode's topic is going to be one that's sure to spark, no pun intended, some debate within the community. This time around, we'll be looking at the question, should all Planeswalkers be universally allowed as commanders? And under what context, if any, should they be legal, if at all?
To better clarify, this article will not only contain some of the pros and cons of this topic, but also contain some of the more viable concerns and corner cases related to this topic, including the curious question on commander damage, the absurd power potential in semi-casual and semi-competitive games.
Mm-hmm.
After all, can potato players deal with the rules change on this magnitude?
Semi-casual, semi-competitive, sure.
How does this affect CDH community?
If at all, right? And there are some concerns there.
Yep.
The wide open door of other legendary permanents becoming your commander due to this precedence. That's kind of funny too. What other walkers could be potentially problematic? And then finally, which cards could or should be banned or be considered for banning, if all walkers should become legal. So, by the tone of what we've described so far, you may be wondering if we're going to take a side in this discussion. For the purposes of this discussion, we will not be taking any sides, merely just explaining them as we understand them in context. Ultimately, it will be up to you, the pilot, to decide whether or not you think walkers should be legal and in what context. So with that all said, let's first look at the pros of making all Planeswalkers legal.
Definitely. Let's kick this all off. Precedents. First, let's start off with the obvious, and that there is already a precedence for this event to take place.
Yep.
Since C14, of course, and when commanders first were printed as commanders, that was a cat let out of the bag.
Yeah, that's being polite.
and then heck, even recently, was it C18?
You're talking C19.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah, C18.
C18. Yeah,
C18,
we had to play
you're right.
we had another batch of Planeswalker commanders.
Sure, and you also had the release of Modern Horizons, and more recently Throne of Eldraine, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we also I remember another playable set of Planeswalkers we also got right now.
Sure.
The Ronin twins from Battle Bond.
Yeah, Will and Rowan Kenrith.
Yeah, the Kenrith twins. So yeah, no, this bag has already been let out. In fact, even in CDH alone, one of the top decks, TCV stacks, is accepted viable archetype.
Oh yeah, no, and you're totally right to make mention of that. Teferi Chainveil has been an accepted archetype since it came out back in C14. And since then, the Son of a Gun has been putting up wonderful results all across the world. However, to date, that's been really the only walker to really ascend to the viability of higher echelon tiers of CDH viability. In fact, the only one that even remotely comes close to that would be Duretti Scrap Servant. And that would be pretty much only in an artifact shell.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on, shall we? Let's look at the diversification of the meta and or field. Because right now, the meta is pretty much governed by partners, right?
Pretty much.
Right. So this leads us to our second point. Allowing walkers to be fully legal opens up the meta to new 2 and 3 card combos and synergies that could potentially give other established archetypes a run for their money, and could be, in competitive, semi-competitive circles, give an opportunity to make some tribal decks even potentially viable in those circles, for example. Now, by making walkers legal, the power level in turn would substantially increase in our opinion. As an example, let's take Tamiyo Field Researcher. Most people see her as a 2-card combo with Doubling Season, and that on the surface that would be a good assessment. However, that doesn't take into consideration certain setups for this interaction, such as Flash Rector, specifically Flash with Arena Rector, which can cheat out Doubling Season into play.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Let's take another example off of this, of course. This time from a semi-competitive perspective. Normally, tribal decks are at best pub stomp magic worthy.
Sure.
And werewolves, obviously being one of the jokes of tribes and the
sure,
commander.
They're no exception to this rule.
no exception to this rule, of course, along with any number of tribes. Swapping out Ulrich of the Cullen Horde for Arlen Chord from Shadow over Innistrad
Yep.
would, in our opinion, make a powerful upgrade to that already solid archetype. In part because of her ability to defend yourself, and on both sides of her, no less, and her emblem's interaction with from the banned Paradox engine nowadays.
So assuming Paradox engine was legal, her emblem's interaction with Paradox engine would be kind of funny.
Would have been.
But since Paradox engine isn't legal anymore, thank you, Sheldon Menery. That's a joke, by the way, kids. Let's move on, shall we?
No, most definitely.
Now, of course, these are just two examples with green in mind. What about blue? Let's look at blue. Tezzeret the Seeker, Tweaky Pete as I like to call him, can directly find any number of artifacts that will help him go infinite and will allow you an alternative for people who normally play Teferi Temporal Archmage. One such line for Tezzeret, for example, would be killing off Tez as soon as he hits the field the first time to find Rings of Brighthearth, only to then replay Tezzeret again later to then go find Grim Monolith and Gemstone Array by copying the negative X ability on Tezzeret with Rings of Brighthearth. Mm-hmm. That's pretty nasty.
Oh, yeah, I know. And here's another one for you. Another example of this whole thing. This time from Dominaria.
Sure.
And we were going to welcome you to Corporate Karn, a.k.a. Karn, Sign of Urza.
Yep.
With him as a commander, a pilot could potentially set itself up as a colorless stacks list that not only protects itself, but also acts as card advantage from the command zone.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Now, these are just a few examples, but we're fairly sure you could come up with some of your own. Naturally, anything that generates raw card advantage will be a house to deal with, and many creatures don't have the versatility that a Planeswalker frankly has, with the exception of maybe Deathrite Shaman.
Which is, quite frankly, almost banned in everything at this point.
Well, it was banned in Legacy a year ago, but that's beside the point. Here's something for you. Boros, the redheaded stepchild of competitive Commander.
Oh, the ugly redheaded stepchild?
Right. Boros, for example, with Nahiri the Harbinger at the helm, could potentially feasibly give access to card advantage from the command zone, and card advantage is something that Boros as a color spectrum struggles to deal with. This could also allow Boros to become more feasible in a semi-competitive meta, and even potentially, someday in the future, God forbid, become a CDH viable spectrum to operate under.
You know, if Boros ever became CDH worthy, all of CDH was going to be just looking at it and go, what the frick is happening now? Did Armageddon come to our doorstep?
Yeah, it came in the form of a 4-mana sorcery. So let's look at our next point on this, which is interacting with walkers outside of combat.
Yeah, no, this one is a pretty important one here.
Sure.
So with the advent of certain new sets in recent times, mainly during a couple extra sets, we had Ixalan a while back. We now have we're going in through Eldraine.
Sure, we had namely Ixalan and Amonkhet block.
Yeah, that was years ago.
Right.
But truth be told, is that there wasn't a whole lot of options here, right?
Sure, and now we have cards out there like the Immortal Sun that can shut off walkers with no problem.
Which, by the way, you all should get your copies of Immortal Sun because that card is dope.
Well, I was just saying, how much is that card? Like $15-$20? Or is it like even higher than that?
It's higher than that nowadays.
That'd be interesting to look up. Now, putting that aside, of course, that doesn't count cards like Vampire Hexmage, Aether Snap, Hex Parasite, and cards like them that drain counters off of permanents. Now, what this means in context is that problematic walkers can still be interacted with on a proactive level and thus kept in check.
Not to mention, we also involve cards like Bedevil and such like that can also straight up kill them.
Sure, that's
Hero's
a good point.
Downfall is a hilarious thing.
Yep. In fact, let's get into the resiliency to kill effects.
Which is an issue on this one. Currently, there are a few different cards that can directly kill or either destroy or exile planeswalkers, and unfortunately, most of those cards are quite frankly unplayable in the CDH meta.
Sure. In part, mainly due to lack of deck design space, right?
Outside of creature-oriented decks, you will generally have to play with certain types of catch-all removal cards that might see someday, but usually won't for various reasons. In fact, Assassin's Trophy is a great example of a card that sees play on a regular basis, but do not rely on every deck to play that card.
Sure, Abrupt Decay is another example.
Yeah.
Now, how about in the instance of board wipe, since that's an interesting point to look at too. In that case, there's a handful or so cards in Magic's history that can wipe out a field full of walkers, but once again, most of them are unplayable in a competitive EDH context, either because of some downside, such as exiling all the permanents you control, such as what's seen with Apocalypse, or by having a high mana cost, such as in Garruk's Wake. While there are some exceptions that are relatively cheap to play and use, such as Hour of Revelation or Oblivion Stone, these are typically exception and not the rule. As for spot removals related to walkers that are CMC 4 and below, there are cards out there like Dreadbore, Ruinous Path, Hero's Downfall, Liliana's Defeat, Never to Return, and Nissa's Defeat that exist. Although it's potentially possible that others could come along that could be added to that list. Of those, Never to Return doesn't really count, because even though the Never side is 3 CMC, the total CMC of the card is 7. And in an ad nauseum build, that's going to really hurt you. It could possibly even kill you.
On the other hand, though, board wipes are a blocker's best friend. Cards like Obliterate and Jackal-Hops can really set you up for a Planeswalker-oriented win if your opponents have no means of accessing your board. In stack-oriented builds that involve land destruction, this could set you up not only to defend your walker, but also put you in a position that will let you benefit off the misery of your opponents, and if/when they resolve. For those reasons, we feel that Planeswalkers, while some of them are powerful, will not be quite as impactful in the CDH meta.
But will still be relatively well positioned. And I would think, like, for example, Lord Windgrace in a Stax MLD hybrid shell could even possibly see some fringe play.
Almost definitely.
Now, with that all said, let's take a look at some of the cons of making all Planeswalkers legal.
Yes, because for every light side of the coin there's also a dark side to this coin.
Right, and let's get the first one just right out of the way. Doubling season.
This is about as obvious as it gets here.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's look at the elephant in the room, right?
Doubling season.
Instantly ultiming your Planeswalker as soon as it hits, due to the high-powered synergy that is inherent to Doubling Season, can cause some massive feel-bads within the semi-casual to semi-competitive community. It probably won't do that, though, in regular competitive EDH.
No, because in the regular feel-bads is...
No, we appreciate Himalayan pink salt. Some of us, like myself, appreciate Dead Sea salt. Now, this, of course, doesn't take into consideration certain cards like Deep Glow Skate and even Varel of the Hullclade if you manage to turn him into an artifact or turn your walker into an artifact, which can let you double the counters on your walkers potentially at will. This naturally results in the bending of the color pie into the favor of green a bit heavier than normal.
Walkers that appear to be a benefit the most from them becoming legal will become more likely in no order of appearance. Tamnio Field Researcher, Samut the Tested, Shihili Rai, in a Teamer shell involving Sarkhan the Unbroken.
Yep.
Zyndagost the Reveler.
Sure.
Sarkhan Vol. Tuzzert the Seeker, and Vraska the Unseen. To be fair, this doesn't take in consideration any number of Grooks in mono green that could benefit here as well.
Sure, and of those walkers mentioned, the walkers that appear to be the most CDH viable, in our opinion, are Tezzeret the Seeker in a TCV stack shell, and Tamio Field Researcher in a Flash Rector style deck, which could in theory cause havoc for some opponents, also provided that it's in a stack shell. Of course, this doesn't account for any potential future walkers that are not yet printed, which could also change the meta.
So another elephant in the room here that we need to talk about is the whole thing on emblems.
Yeah, the lack of direct interaction with Planeswalkers, specifically their emblems. So, with the exception of Trickbind, Stifle, Bind, Void Slime, Nimble Obstructionist, Reroute, and a few other cards in all of Magic's history, there are no other cards that can directly deal with interacting with a walker's emblem. And this can become a problem for control shells, as cards like these are very few and far between.
Almost definitely. And the fact is, this is not even considering those. It's like, most people think of emblems, like some of the lower emblems, of course, but there's some really problematic emblems.
Oh yeah, like for example, if we want to take a look at an emblem like Ren and 6 from more recent years, from Modern Horizons, we see that you now have the ability to cast spells out of your graveyard. Now, granted, the thing that shuts that down are cards like Grafdigger's Cage and Static Grave Hate like Leyline of the Void. But can you imagine being able to play MLD from out of your yard?
For pitching a land?
Counter spells for fun?
Yeah, counter spells,
Like, okay, you know, Kess is bad enough in and of herself, and I love Kess, don't get me wrong. But can you imagine being able to play any instant or sorcery at will out of your yard? Not on your turn?
Oh, shit, hell. We could bring it into old school Tameo in this one.
Yeah,
Her recycling clause? Like,
yuck.
wait, recycle without no drawback? What?
Yeah, that's pretty gross. But let's move on before we start digressing any further. Let's look at the potential precedents for new card types that were not intended to be generals. So, with the advent of Dominaria block, we now have legendary sorcery cards such as Karn's Temporal Sundering that sidestep the non-legendary permanent expectation. Using this precedent, we could possibly see cards like Genju of the Realms, any of the Nephilim from the Guildpact block, and many others being greenlighted for being allowed as generals even though they were never intended to be.
By proxy, this sidesteps the requirements for the rules of this format. Clarification will be necessary in order to deal with the confusion on this regard.
Now, for the most part, I don't see much of any issue coming up within competitive Commander, because at that rate, you'll end up coming up with rules in order to delineate stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. No.
But on the lower levels, such as playing semi-casual and semi-competitive, there could be a lot of misgivings one way or the other.
Yeah.
So, moving on, let's look at the delineation of commander damage. Now, this issue particularly pertains to Gideon-oriented planeswalkers, but could also pertain to any walker that has the capacity to either turn into a creature themselves or who can create creature tokens to do their bidding.
Yeah, now this is something that requires some clarification on this behalf. However, though, I'm a big, strong component, and I bet Jeff could side with me on this one.
Sure.
It is not that the fact that the card can do damage, it's the fact that the card itself deals combat damage, which is determined if it does commander damage.
Sure. Now, I'm glad that you touched on that. I want to touch on that in just a little bit. Before we do, though, we should also mention that there are other problematic generals that can cause problems, such as Soren Markov. More specifically, its interaction with Wound Reflection could instantly kill an opponent. That's pretty powerful right there, just by coming out. Now, other walkers could also include Sarkon the Dragon Speaker, Koth of the Hammer, Nicol Bolas the Ravager, or any of the Origin flip walkers from Magic Origins. Now, let's move on from there onto what we were originally talking about. In a semi-casual to semi-competitive environment, any of these cards could potentially be an issue if a delineation isn't made, and this is where we're getting into combat damage. Now, in our collective opinion, walkers, specifically the commander, should be allowed to do commander damage. But the question becomes whether or not it should be just the walkers themselves, or should that also extend over to the tokens, should they be able to create them. And the reason why is because the walker itself is responsible for creating those tokens. Since there is a lack of discernment as to what constitutes commander damage for the purposes of planeswalkers, this issue should be clarified before moving forward in order to avoid any feel-bads. Under normal circumstances, it is the card itself that is responsible for commander damage. However, with the advent of walkers becoming legal, there is the possibility that tokens and or other representations of the card can do damage on its behalf, which could, in theory, constitute commander damage.
In CDH context, commander damage is usually not a thing,
No,
quite frankly. As in storm combos and stack combos are usually a lot more effective in this respect, we don't foresee this becoming an issue. one way or the other for CDH.
Oh yeah, in fact, I think the only commander that even remotely wins off of commander damage technically is Godo Bandit Warlord.
And that's if their main plan goes away. Like, time to go to plan B.
Right.
You're gonna start smacking people to death.
Speaking of plan B, let's move on to the next section, which is in case of emergency, break glass. We're going to be talking at this point about problematic cards post-legalization. So, which walkers could become problematic? Let's look at that. Which cards could or should be banned or be considered banning if walkers become legal? In this particular section, our final section, we'll be discussing that here briefly. So, the cards that immediately come to mind, at least for me, and by all means, feel free to throw your 2 cents in, Cole.
Mm-hmm.
Teferi, Temporal Archmage, is a problem. Arena Rector, Academy Rector, Doubling Season, the Chain Veil, Tamiyo Field Researcher, and Tezzeret the Seeker.
You know, I'm actually on board to say that that this list here that you've put up, that is pretty solid. All right, I think Venzor, Summonjor, could become a major issue.
Venser?
Yeah, because he makes Brago look like a pushover in his own archetype.
Venser the Sojourner does naturally have the ability to exile a permanent. That could be potentially problematic.
Yeah, that could be problematic.
Teferi Time Raveler.
Yeah, no.
That's funny.
Telling people, no, you cannot play Magic.
Except on your turn. Yeah, that could be a problem. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Yeah.
Oko, Thief of Crowns, could be funny.
Oh, yeah, no. There's a list of Planeswalker here that could cause issues. And the fact is, though, is that, first off, if we're thinking outside of Planeswalkers, now we're bringing an Academy Rector, right? Which could tutor up Doubling Season.
Yep.
And Doubling Season, I hate to admit to it, but Doubling Season with any of these commanders is almost an auto include.
Yeah.
If you have green and you're playing a Planeswalker commander, are you playing Doubling Season? If you're not, you're wrong.
Right. Obviously, this doesn't take into consideration any other walker that can directly tutor, such as any of the Lilianas, or any other walker that hasn't been created up to this point. But the general idea is that if the walker itself can support a 2-card combo, which can set up an immediate win from the command zone, then the card, at the very least, deserves a second look and a possible consideration for banning in the future. As for cards like Gideon of the Trials, and other Gideons as well, we personally see these cards as more of an annoyance than an actual possible problematic card. For now, though, let the chips fall where they may, and let's see how things sort themselves out.
So, at the end of the day, regardless of whatever happens, it's up to you, the pilot, and at the individual meta to decide what's reasonable and what's not. At higher stakes level, it becomes a deadly game of can you top this as the table wins, can be determined simply by responding at the right time or not responding appropriately.
Yep.
At a more casual level, however, though, not all players have that depth of knowledge of the stack or the rules, so they may take advantage of the situation.
Yep. Now, either way, it'll be intriguing to see how the ban list shakes itself out over the next several months to years. And as events develop, we'll let you know where we stand and what our ponderings are with respect to Planeswalkers potentially becoming legal. Now that's all the time that we have for this episode of the Tryhard Academy podcast. As always, if you like this content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for further content. And as always, it's always better to get good rather than get wrecked.